Ben, actually, so I saw your LinkedIn post a little bit earlier about, you talking about all the ways that you felt like, you you were kind of lacking, like you weren't living up to this like image. And we actually, the newsletter that went out today, we were speaking about like living up to that founder image.
Yep.
Um, you know, in your experience, like you listed some things about like, oh, not waking up, early in the morning, things like that. Um, have you ever felt like that's kind of like led to kind of, the absolute downfall of a founder, even though the business is doing great, like at least in the people that maybe you've advised or worked with, have you ever kind of seen that like negativity just like weighs them down so much to the point where they just like stop, you know,
Uh, yeah,
performing?
I think founders are often in a very difficult situation. Startups can be, especially for solo founders. I think it's most difficult for solo founders, and that can be this can be a very lonely pursuit, which is one of the reasons that the Founders Group exists, is to help founders not feel like you have to do it all by yourself, and not feel like you're alone in this, that there are others like you, and that there are other people trying to, we're all figuring out this game together, right? But it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get discouraged when the product market fit isn't there, when when the product isn't shipping fast enough, when your customers are upset, your customers demand a refund. There are all kinds of things that can go wrong with the business. In fact, there's it's kind of like in what was it? Infinity War or Endgame, when Doctor Strange says he saw all the 14 million scenarios, and and Iron Man goes, "How many did we win?" He goes, "One." There's so many ways that this can go wrong. And really, the scenario where everything works, like you're able to figure everything out, you're able to figure out the ops and the product and the sales and the HR and the marketing and all of those, and the alignment, and the founders end up like getting through the woods still on speaking terms with each other. That that's a tough road. So
Mhm.
it is very easy to get discouraged, and there are times when founder mental health ends up being one of the primary barriers to the success of a business. Now, obviously, that we got to be careful about getting cart before horse there, because what's more important, your business or your mental health? Well, in my opinion, it's your mental health for sure. Business serves life, not the other way around. And so, many people, many founders feel like they need to be willing to sacrifice their mental health on the altar of business success. I do not subscribe to that theory. I think that you need to choose pursuits that fit well into the rest of the life you want, not the other way around. Success is one component of life, and so uh, the bigger answer to your question, Anush, is sort of how I guess the bigger question that I think is implied by the question that you're asking is, how does what is the interaction between mental health and business, whether it's success or failure? And I think that's a really important question to ask. And as a founder, you're constantly forced to choose, what is what is the best way to spend this next marginal hour? Do I need to make sure I'm getting enough sleep? Do I need to focus on some self-care? Do I need to spend time with my family? Or do I have time to do some business stuff? And I try to be very involved with my family, but my family knows that like 9 to 5, I'm working, and I might be working from home, but I still have stuff that I need to do. I love spending time with my wife, love spending time with my kids. But that's, this is how I put a roof over our head. It's not, those aren't always easy questions to answer. But I think, you know, you can become very successful, but lose the things that really matter in life. And um, I think that's a bad outcome. So
Yeah.
there's other stuff that's more important.
Absolutely. I think, like the other thing is also like sometimes, founders may start compromising just to get that win. Like, oh, like a a client sign is a client sign, even if they're paying me 2% of what they should be paying me. Because I just spent a week dealing with a client like that, where I
Mhm.
offered him, this is what the contract would be worth. And then they come back to me with like, oh, I'm willing to pay like less than 2% of that. It's like, well, okay, the difference between what you want, what I can give, what I can like give to you, like I'm already giving you a discount. It's like I don't want to chase you just for the fact that oh I can claim that oh I signed a client and now I'm getting revenue because I can't deliver you what you want delivered for what you're paying me. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I could have I could feel that thought process going in my head. It's like, should I just do it just because, hey, it's gonna be a client signed in the books. It will count as a success, but at what cost?
Yeah.
It's complete cost to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah. Margie has a question kind of related to, what we're just talking about. When a company is struggling, how do you decide whether to double down or step back?
Ah. This is a tough one. I get this question a lot, and I don't know that there's like a single good answer to something like this. I think the maybe a good way to think about answering this question is you in business. I think the default state is failure, right? Most startups fail. And there are some what I'd call Main Street businesses that I think are much more likely to succeed. If you start a law firm, if you as an attorney, if you start a law firm, if you start an accounting firm, if you start a landscaping business, if you start um, an HVAC business. Obviously there are certifications involved, but those more community staples, financial service, financial manager, wealth management. Those businesses are more likely to succeed. Startups mostly fail. What I think the thesis for every business should be this is probably going to fail. Now let's see if we can prove ourselves wrong. Let's see if we can prove ourselves wrong on this business. But the thesis is this business probably won't work. And what that forces you to do is it forces you to find compelling problems to solve, not compelling to you but compelling to the market that you're choosing. And so getting out there and having conversations with people, doing discovery. Read the Mom Test, the really good book on customer discovery by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's the only good book I've ever found on customer discovery. And I was very fortunate to meet a mentor at the right time named guy by the name of Steve Tinkle, sadly no longer with us. But he taught me customer discovery, and he was a savant at that. And he was just so good at discovering, hey, here's a good opportunity for a business. And I've learned how to do that. I'm now pretty good at seeing, yep, here's a business that'll work. There's a business that'll work. What I'm bad at is then going and building the business. I'm a bad product, as I mentioned on LinkedIn this morning. I'm a bad product builder. I'm a bad operator. That's my curse, is I can see all the opportunities and I can't pursue any of them without a team. And so, but but the deciding when it's not working, the challenge is how long does it take to prove yourself right that you're like, okay, this is just something that's not going to find product market fit. And I think it's worth continuing to ask questions until you feel like, nah, we proved ourselves right on this one. Where that line is a matter of personal discretion. But I would say it's very, very rare to run into a situation where you feel like you quit on something too soon. Now, founders will say all the time, you'll hear people say all the time, I had this idea. and then somebody else executed on it and made $1 billion. Well, maybe you could have executed on it and made $1 billion, or maybe they had a better team. Maybe they were executing better. Maybe they were just better funded. That's what happened with Uber. Uber was better funded than Sidecar, who went out of business, and Lyft, who I think also got to market before Uber. But Uber was just able to raise more money and saturate the market. Good for them. And funding does matter. Uh, but um, but there's all sorts of other executional stuff that I think determines kind of who wins in these situations. And for the founder to say, "Oh, that was my idea first," it doesn't mean anything. Ideas are not worth anything. Execution of ideas are worth billions, trillions. But the idea itself just doesn't matter. Founders get worried all the time. Somebody's going to steal my idea. No, they aren't. No, they aren't. And nobody cares about stealing your idea. So yeah, that so I would say get yourself to the point where you're comfortable knowing this just isn't going to find product market fit. And there's all sorts of other stuff out there. And so Margie, the benefit of that is that because if you admit to yourself that the idea is not special, there's actually a freedom in that because there are so many other ideas out there that are all just as good. It's finding the one that can find product market fit and that you and your team, if you have one, are well equipped to execute on. That's what really matters. It's not the, oh man, I hate letting go of this idea. The idea doesn't matter. The idea doesn't matter. It's all the execution. And the
Yes,
market,
thank
like the things around the idea matter, but that's market, that's customer discovery, that's all that other work that has to happen.
thank you, Ben. I know we keep coming back to that topic of like, it's execution that matters. Like
Mhm.
ideas, they exist everywhere. So like 10 other people have the same ideas as you is who can actually get it done first.
Yeah, and if they don't, if nobody else is like, founders love saying nobody else is doing this. Investors hate hearing that. I know I've said this before, but when investors like if nobody else is even like playing next to this space, as a founder, what you want to do if you have no competitors, which you might, you want to look at is somebody doing something else that's kind of like this. And if that the answer to that is no, you probably just have a bad market. And so investors are like, don't tell me nobody else is doing this. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear who else is doing at least something similar. Because if there's nobody at least trying to solve the problem that is as a problem that is next to the problem you're solving, then there probably isn't a market. So
Yeah. I think that's a key distinction because I remember like na- almost a year ago or something, or maybe half a year ago, there was a conversation going on in Discord about like, oh, like somebody has to be doing something, like unique for the first time with no competitors. Otherwise, how would innovation, be even there? It's like, well, you have to reframe it. It's not like, oh, this is a completely new thing. Like it's that this is a better version of something that existed before. You already have that framework. You're just making it better.
yeah, yep. All right, what's next?
Um, Poppy has a question. Considering your experience in the media and entertainment industry, would
Yep.
you consider investing in single podcasts or YouTube channels that may not have a clear business component yet, other than ad revenue?
No. And not because they not because I don't know how they're going to monetize. I just don't think stuff like that is typically scalable. You're looking at it's like investing in a movie. I did work in the movie business, movies and TV for 8 years, and you're banking on moonshots, and that to a degree that's true in startups. Period. But the market forces that determine whether or not a particular movie or a particular television show is a success are things that you don't have any control over as a business person. It's not about business principles. It's about zeitgeist and things like that. And YouTube, I think, is a lot of the same stuff. It's and can you build a YouTube channel to success little by little? Yeah, sure. Can you build it in a venture scalable type of way? I don't know that. I don't know that I believe that. Um, so. So no, I would not invest in a YouTube channel. Period. Like it would be, I'd be shocked if I ever invested in a podcast or a YouTube channel on like a in like a venture type of way.
Yeah. That's a very, I love your initial answer. No.
Honest answer.
Yeah. Margie has a question for you next, Ben. Margie's asking, what founder mistakes do you find yourself helping solve repeatedly?
The I think there are quite a few. I think pitches running long. That one keeps showing up. The founder who says, yes, I understand the 10-minute time limit, and then they haven't, they're still talking about the product 10 minutes in. And the let's see what else. The trap of thinking I can't get traction without investment dollars, and I can't get investment dollars without traction, so I'm just hosed. Getting past that, that mental trap. That's another one that's popping up a lot. For whatever reason, I think founders are getting told by somebody, not me, but by somebody, don't put your valuation or your safe cap on your deck. I think it's very bad advice. It's the first question I'm going to ask in Q&A every single time. And if the founder obfuscates, like somebody came into the founders group and did a pitch, and they didn't have their valuation. I said, "What's the valuation?" He said, "That's between the individual founder and the individual investor." And I said, "I'm the individual investor. You're the individual founder. What's the valuation?" And I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm just saying, like. And he said 5 million, and I was like, "All right, we're done." Like, there's no, and I'm not, again, not trying to be rude, but like, if do not play the game with investors of you go first, no, you go first. Like, you're pitching me. Like, and yes, sure, we can negotiate, but don't say no, I'm not giving a number until you give a number. Like, you lose in that situation. That's bad faith negotiation, in my opinion, as an investor, and I'm going to walk away. Um, so I think that there must be some guidance out there telling people don't put your cap on your deck, don't put your valuation on your deck. I think that is bad advice. Now maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. I'm always open to that possibility, but I think it's bad advice. So other founder mistakes. Not doing the discovery. I think actually my friend Levi at Texas A&M actually he correctly accused me of this recently. He said, "I think you're trying to build product too fast." And this was with something related to this AEP thing that's kind of next to the founders group. We're doing some stuff with institutional tech transfer is one of the things that we're looking at. And I was like, yeah, so we're going to build venture Tinder for MBAs. And he said, okay, that's one product that might be good here. And I was like, what do you mean? They already told us what they want. The client, the buyer named the product, and he's like, does the buyer actually know what they would pay for? That's just something that he said casually in a meeting. He was like, I want this now. Is he the one who's going to be like, uncovering budget for it? Is he the one managing the workflows? Is he the one managing the data? Like, is he even the buyer? I was like, oh, crap, you're right. I was wrong. And I had to and so I had to kind of rethink. All right. So in the age of AI, right? So, Gad, I saw you made a reference to the age of AI, and that, that we can come back to the idea of stealing ideas. But what I'm talking about right now is because product can get built so fast, right? There's this dopamine rush that comes from, I built something. The harder question to answer is the customer discovery question, the product market fit question, which is what I'm building something that people will actually pay money to help them solve a problem. And there's this long chain of questions that has to be answered in terms of like the problem solving of it. So does the customer have a problem? Does the buyer have a problem? Do they know they have a problem? Do they want to solve the problem? Are they already trying to solve the problem? Because if they're not already trying to solve the problem, they may say they want the problem solved, but they may not care enough to pay money for it. Do they believe you can solve the problem? Do they want you to solve the problem, et cetera, et cetera? Like there's it ends up being kind of this 10 line chain of logic. And if the answer to any of those questions are no, you're hosed. So so but there are telltale signs, and we've talked about this one before. The most obvious one is if somebody's using a spreadsheet for something. That's a good sign that they have a problem, they care about solving it, and they're solving it badly right now. That's a great sign because they're taking action. A spreadsheet is like kind of a step one solution. This probably doesn't work all that well, but it gets the job done. There and other sort of, like putting kind of jamming a square peg in a round hole in terms of the tools. Those are other good signs. But yeah, just bringing it back around, any other founder mistakes that we find ourselves addressing repeatedly? Kevin, you may have some perspective on this. Like I mean, obviously you've been working forward in the founder seat yourself. What founder mistakes did you find yourself kind of banging your head against the wall with, or other founders that you've mentored? Like what have been the repeats here?
Hi everybody. Um, I think a large part of it would be like not val. So it depends on at what level the founder is at in the journey, right? If it's in the
Mhm.
very beginning, it may be along the lines of the cart before the horse. A lot of times it's like worrying about things that aren't problems yet. That's what I generally try to avoid doing as much as possible. And my developers will do it for me, and I'll have to caution them and go, guys, like this might be a problem and you may foresee the problem, but because we are founders, we tend to just, excuse my French, break shit. Like go fast, break shit, and then if you need to solve it later on, but it might not be a problem till you get to that stage, right? So a lot of times people get paralyzed by going like, well, what if this happens or what if that happens? And you go, don't worry about the what if you can't control the things you can. And then when you hit that wall, you'll solve it either with money or with time, right? Um, Another one that I personally hit a lot of, and I call it very expensive lessons, just developing things that no one wants. Like the nickel pay system probably has 125 add-ons that we've developed because I'm like that would be really cool, and I think that people would like this without asking the customer base if they would actually like it or not, and it becomes like a nice to have, not a must have. Um, so that's kind of where I see it. And then to kind of go on with like maybe like fundraising, it's that trap you're talking about. Like I need money so that I can get traction. And traction comes in many forms. And I talk to this with the people in Boston when I go to these events too. And they're like, well, like if I just had like 100 grand, or actually here's a really common one, asking for too much without knowing why. That's a big one. I met a founder who's going for a $1 million pre-seed because they had advice from people that said that, well, under $1 million is like no one's going to pay attention. And I'm like, if I gave you $1 million right now, what would you do? And they go, well, I'd spend a little bit on this, that, that. I'm like, okay, so you've accounted for like 300K. What's the rest of the money going to do in the bank? Right. So you want to like make sure that that's like very clear. So like if when Nickel Pay is going out for their like funding, I have very exact numbers. Like 400 grand going to like overhead and hiring new people, and these people cost this amount of money, right? The rest of it is going to product development. Here's a product roadmap. The rest of that is in case these things fail, and we have a contingency for each. I have a Bruce because my dog, but a contingency for each. And now an investor goes, "Oh, he's thought about this."
Yeah.
So I'll pause.
Yeah, no, that's really wise, Kevin. I do agree that it's good to have. You don't necessarily need an ancillary slide for it. Like your primary slide is just going to say 30% to this, 20% to that, 15% to that, whatever. But I do think that it's a good idea to have kind of the spend budgeted, in your data room. And you don't have to necessarily have an ancillary slide for it on your deck. But yeah, knowing where you're going to spend the money. Kevin, I loved what you said about you know uh, dealing with things that aren't problems yet, which is often a way of, and I'm very guilty of this, is stalling on things that are actually problems right now. We're doing some advisory work, and I can see the bus coming down Main Street in turn, like the bus that's coming down Main Street right now is our system, that our product, which is not an external facing product, it's an internal product that we use to generate, investor relations content and LinkedIn content, and importantly, investor introductions. That system is basically at MVP stage right now. It works, but not very well. And removing friction from that process is the most important thing we can do right now. I hate doing that. I am not a systems person. I want to go talk to people. And yet I know that what has to be done is I got to get in the weeds with our technical team and our non-technical team and figure out, like, all right, where are the points of friction? Where are the 100 points of friction that we have to get out of the system in order to make this thing move faster? And I don't want to do it, and I have to do it anyway. And so the so that's that is the thing. Like, solve the problems that are in front of you right now, even if they're not the problems that you're best at solving, which kind of runs a little bit counter to what I posted on LinkedIn this morning, was try to act out of your strengths. But there are times where it's so crucial to get a different kind of problem solved that you just have to put your big boy pants on. You just have to put your big girl pants on and do it anyway. So that's my take on that.
The one caveat, though, is if you see a problem that is going to hit your customer, you approach it first.
True. Yeah.
That's the big one. It's like, so right now we're going through fireworks season and banks are closed on Friday. Right? So people's payouts are going to be delayed. And I know that people get nervous.
Yeah.
So I in advance I go, hey, banks are closed on Fridays. Everyone goes, okay. And then I go, okay, great. And then, but that also shows the customer, hey, they're thinking in advance. So it's just like, I'll caveat that and then just go, when it affects you, don't solve it in advance. When it affects others, solve it in advance.
Yep. Anush, what you got?
Margie's got a question for you, Ben. Margie's asking, how do you assess pricing for products, creating a new market when there's no direct benchmarks? Maybe not 100% related to investment, but pricing model has a big influence on investment, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And knowing that you have your monetization model locked in well is very important to getting investment dollars. That is something that I look at. Do they know, is it a freemium model? Is it, like how do they bring in customers? What unit economics? What does CAC look like? What does LTV look like? All of those kinds of things. And for anyone who doesn't know, CAC is customer acquisition cost, basically the marketing and sales cost of bringing in a new customer on average, and then LTV is lifetime value. So basically, how much money do you spend getting a customer? How much money do you get getting a customer? Figuring out pricing. Good question. And there is no one answer to this. There is no one thing that's kind of the authority on everything. What I would say is do as much experimentation as you can reasonably afford to do without alienating your customer. And Kevin, I'll see you got something here too. Thank you for jumping in. Where I would start is AI is really good at 0 to 1 stuff. So I would talk to AI about, here's who the product is, here's who the customer is, give it as much context as possible, and say, how can I do, where would you start on pricing? And it'll give you some options. And then say, how could I pretty quickly get to some what's called A/B testing, where you're testing one pricing model versus another and seeing where you have more success. Ideally, now the challenge with that is if you have a small customer base, those two things may not be equal. You may be testing different pricing models in populations that are not the same, and that's a flawed experimentation. You're just doing the best that you can because you can't change what your customer base is. But that's my first thought is use AI and use experimentation to help you lock in on what the right pricing model is. Kevin, I'll kick it over to you because it seemed like you have some thoughts on this too. And you're muted, Kevin.
So what I did was, and I've gotten this question from, I think Anush asked me, right? And then, and I think this would be a good thing to actually even have like a kind of a webinar on, because we're going through that process right now. Is how do you price things properly?
Sure.
What we did was we created we listed all the features that our system does. Had AI block them into buckets, and then had the AI agent find the buckets and find the most comparable solutions out there. Find that range, put yourself in the middle or a little higher than that, and then discount it for people to go, for you, you're coming in, we're going to give you like a 30% discount if you sign on for if you pay a full year in advance, if you sign a 3-year deal, because then it increases valuation because now your lifetime value of your customer has increased, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? So you want to give yourself movement. So that's just kind of where what I did was we just put all the features of our solution and had AI organize them into buckets of like modules we could possibly sell, had the modules compared to what's on the market, and then use that as the comparison base.
Great input, Kevin. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think most everyone here has heard the story of the absolute craziness I went through in trying to figure out my pricing model. Ben, I think I haven't really filled you in on that yet. Hello. But yeah, I think, there's so many different approaches you can take, and it really depends on like kind of sort of like Kevin, like what are you offering and what is that really worth at the end of the day to the customer?
Yeah. And the thing that I don't think anybody's said yet is, in the early going, it's better to charge too little than too much, right? It's better to be too cheap than too expensive, because too cheap, at least you get data. At least you can iterate on product. You're delivering product. Yes, you're not getting paid enough, but if you're too expensive, you're just sitting there sucking your thumb, like waiting for, like just waiting for something to happen. And maybe you're shipping additional, maybe you're shipping additional features or whatever, but being too cheap, you get data. Being too expensive, you don't. In the early going, you don't get data. So err on the side that gives you data. But in the long term, of course, being cheap will kill you. Being too cheap will kill you too. So Margie, what are your thoughts? I see you have a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, because once I met a company and they were offering, like, for big conferences, the headset that is translating in the real life using AI, and the quality was so good, and they wanted to smash the competition completely, so they slashed the pricing in half compared to the competition. And basically people thought it's a scam because it cannot be that good and that cheap at the same time. So this being also too cheap, like it's too good to be true, that's also a trap that actually startups can fall in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly a thing. It feels it feels like the cheap version of the product. The customer psychology, there is a lot of customer psychology in play with things like that. So, but again, like I guess the big thing on all pricing questions is seek the feedback and understand that you are at your customers or you're at the other person's mercy to give you that feedback. And just understand you're going to have to ask for it and ask for it and ask for it again, and be like borderline annoying in terms of how strongly you solicit feedback, because that's oxygen for you as a founder, is knowing like what is working, what is not working. Is it too expensive? Is it too cheap? Like, and having some friends involved who will answer the questions for you, especially be careful about asking. We've talked about classic mom test thing. Do not ask your friends in the early going, is this business a good idea? Because the answer will always be yes, even when it's no. But once you actually have a product, you can count on people, your friends, to they're going to be over nice probably most of the time, but they will give you feedback, and you need to strike that balance between how much of the truth are they telling and how often are they telling it to you. How forthright will they be?
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Oh, Margie's got another question.
I think Kevin also had a question right above that.
Oh, how to calculate CAC? It's all warm intros from investor networks.
It's not easy, is the short answer. But But I would say so CAC really comes into play. What CAC is about is sort of finding an average, sort of what is an average scenario that you can expect. And yeah, if it's all warm intros from investor networks, again, like it's kind of a 0 to 1 problem, because the person put this person in front of you. What I would start with is I would ask Claude or your AI, your LLM of choice, what's a reasonable customer acquisition cost for this, and then BS check it. If it says, well, I expect that getting in touch with the CEO of ExxonMobil will probably cost you $1.50 in most cases, you can say, I think you're FOS on that one, Claude. But yeah, I would AI is really good at helping you generate frameworks from which to think about things. And so this is a great question, because yeah, if it's all warm intros, like there's no way of quantifying. Like you're just kind of brainstorming in terms of how do you actually quantify how I would get to this person in the wild. And if you can give it specific avatars of, here is a person that was introduced to me, like this is what I know about that person, here's their LinkedIn profile, here's the investor intro that I got from them. What do you think it would have cost me? Give me kind of a high low for a 25th percentile, 75th percentile, or a 10th, 90th for what you think it would cost to get in touch with this person in the wild, both in terms of money and also in terms of time. How many person hours would it cost me to eventually get to this decision maker? And AI will not be good at finishing solving that problem for you. It will be really good at starting you on the road to solving that problem. AI is great at stuff like that.
I know like some kind of, I don't know how accurate it is or if it's even valid, but like I've been told that you can just say, kind of similar to, like trying to figure out cost of goods sold for a software company, where you're not selling a physical product, you don't have inventory, anything like that. You can be like, okay, well, I had to sit through 5 meetings to get to the person who made that decision and sign the contract. Okay, well, if I now take 5 hours of my time, figure out what my hourly rate is, that's my customer acquisition cost. I don't know if that's a valid framework. It's a framework, but
yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. The more data you have, obviously, the more information that you have, the easier it is to solve this problem. Which kind of goes back to the gather data, gather feedback, like all that stuff is so important. Hey girl. One other thing that I would just be careful of, Anush, is conflating CAC with cost of goods sold. That one, there's a little bit of, I would keep those things separate.
Yes, of course.
So CAC is more of a marketing metric, and cost of goods sold is more of an operations or product metric. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Something I learned very recently is that your cost of goods sold will also include development cost for the product itself.
Sure.
So that was fun for me to learn.
Yeah, and sometimes and now we're getting into accounting stuff. This is pretty specific, but sometimes it's hard to, like, sometimes development cost has to be filed under SG&A because it's hard. It's impossible to break out product by product or like sale by sale. So yeah, but it does have to go somewhere, of course. So if you can, typically the rule is if you can break it down to a unit basis, then then it should go under cost of goods sold. And if you can't get it down to unit basis, then it has to, like, then it's more likely that it will have to go under SG&A. That's kind of the classic accounting framework. And by the way, some accountant will come in here and say, no, come on, Ben, sit down. I'll tell everybody how it actually works, because I'm not a master at that kind of thing. But that's my understanding of the frame.
The funny thing is the framework also changes in different geographies. I know in India it's completely different, and what things you can count where.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right.
So when my dad tells me, "Oh, this should go here," it's like, "Well, Dad, you don't know about U.S. accounting."
Yeah, Gap does things a little differently, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
I got about 10
Margie's,
more minutes.
yeah, I think Margie's got a good question, and we could probably wrap up after that.
Okay.
Margie's asking, "What's the startup rule you think founders should ignore?"
Well, I mean, one of the obvious ones is people seem to be hearing that they shouldn't put their valuation on their deck because, like most of the decks that I'm seeing right now do not have a valuation on the ask slide, and they don't, even if they're raising on a safe, they don't have the valuation cap. All right. So yeah, I think a lot of people are getting advised not to put that on there, and I think that's bad advice. I think that investors are annoyed by that, and like for myself, it's the first question that I ask if it's not on there. But beyond that, yeah, I would say maybe not so much a rule as just as a custom that's developing, like, or a temptation that's developing as product, especially software product, because becomes so much easier to build and ship. Being very cautious about falling in love with, like, or getting sucked into that dopamine rush of, we built the product and we built it in one night, or 1 hour. And well, okay, but what is your customer going to do with that product? Is it something that they actually care about? So I would say that is the biggest temptation that I think founders have to contend with right now, especially if you're software enabled, AI enabled. Like, that's the challenge.
Patrick's asking, "So if I'm pricing a product in the early stages of my business, should I focus on attracting and retaining customer first so that the risk of decreasing churn doesn't become a problem?"
Let me answer that question in two parts, kind of, because the question is asked in two different parts. I would say yes, focus on attracting and retaining customers first, because again, like, even if you're not charging enough, like in the early going, I do think that it's better to not charge enough than to charge too much. You trying to get through? All right, go ahead, go on. So yes, I would focus on attracting and retaining customers first. The risk of decreasing churn still could become a problem if you are forced to raise your prices later, or if you just do raise your prices later for profitability purposes or for any other purposes. So you can make that not a problem in the early going, and then it still could become a problem later, but that doesn't change the answer to the question. I would focus on attracting and retaining customers first. Grab market share, because customers are revenue to keep running the business, and they're also data. That you can keep iterating, you can keep making the product better, keep making the process better, keep making the customer experience better. Like, it just gives you reps, and there is no substitute for reps. In this respect, the experience does matter, even if it's just the specific experience of running this particular business. For a young founder, or for any founder really, when you're getting into a new business, like, just getting those reps, charge a little bit less, and get the data, get the information, get the reps, get the muscle memory, for yourself and for your business.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. I think that about wraps up our questions for today, unless
Okay.
anybody has any very last minute quick questions.
Thank you so
Going
much. These were
once,
great
going
questions, and thanks to Kevin for jumping in and sharing
Yeah.
the stage and being willing to speak from his experience. Kevin, if you guys didn't know, has grown Nickel Pay to about $1 million in revenue. He's raising a successful round right now. He's on his way to a successful exit. That's so Kevin, yeah, great work so far. I've invested in Kevin's company. We're helping out with some advisory work as well, and very proud of Kevin, and happy to call him a friend as well.
So
I hope
thank you so
everybody
much,
has a good
Ben.
July. If you're in America, happy July 4th. If you're not in America and you're in Canada, happy July 1st. If you were in China, happy China Day. Happy and all that fun jazz.
Yep.
Celebrating all of them in spirit.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and drop. Thank you. Oh, yeah, Kevin.
RG,
Thank
if you
you.
have questions about pricing and stuff like that, we can also chat. So I'm going through the same exercise right now. But
I got to drop. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your questions.
Thank you so
Appreciate the
much,
time.
Ben, for joining.
Cheers.